Hey, hello, how are you? No, I'm not Willie. No, not Brian. I am Bert, and you're watching Road Odyssey. Hey, well, thank you for watching this video. This is about the Moonshiner's cars. So, back in Prohibition, 1920s, all these people needed their alcohol transported. So, namely from Appalachia or even all through the South, here in Texas, as a matter of fact, there were people that made brew. May not have been very healthy for you, but they made it and they sold it, so they had to transport it. So, the folks that drove the cars were trippers, bootleggers, kind of a loosey-goosey term, or runners. So, and oftentimes these were people that were very young. They often learned to drive at a very early age, say 13, 14, somewhere in there. Heck, maybe even younger, who knows. So they knew their roads, they knew what they were doing, but there's plenty of information on that kind of stuff. What I researched was what were these people doing before World War II and right after World War II, maybe up a little later. What did they do to soup up their cars, modify them in order to keep away from the cops and the federal agents? So let's dive into it and see what I found out.
First, a quick bit of history. The temperance movement preceded Prohibition. This movement was against the consumption of alcohol. It started well in the 1700s. For example, in 1737, Native Americans began to campaign against alcohol. The temperance movement in the U.S. began nationally by the 1820s. The reasons for it was the negative effect on people's health, bad personalities, and bad family lives. Also, the Industrial Revolution was ramping up, and they needed sober laborers to operate the heavy machinery. By 1876 and 1891, there were laws, local option laws, that allowed counties and communities to prohibit liquor within their borders, which contributed to the closing, such as here in Texas, all the saloons closed down well before World War I. So the Prohibition era itself was from 1919 to 1933. Although it was repealed in 1933, the taste for illegal moonshine lasted until around the 1960s. Transporting moonshine from the backwoods all the way to the cities and speakeasies and like this downtown Dallas basement speakeasy was a very dangerous job, even if you did have a very nice car like this Stutz. Probably the least exciting car used to transport whiskey and alcohol in the Prohibition era was the Tin Lizzie, the Model T Ford, 177 cubic inch inline four with 20 horsepower. It could go about 40 to 45 miles an hour. Didn't cost a whole lot, and it was extremely popular, so it blended in well with everybody else on the road. Trucks were also very popular in the early 1900s, like this ice truck and this REO Speedwagon from 1936 and this one from 1949. The most popular car of all was the 1939-1940 Ford Coupes, usually standard option, dark colored, very well used by the bootleggers. And as a side note, Clyde Barrow of Bonnie and Clyde and John Dillinger all let Henry Ford know just how much they loved his Fords. The 1951 Ford pickup was probably the most popular moonshine running truck. With its toothy single bar grille and wraparound bumpers, it was very aggressive looking. And what made it great as a moonshine carrier was its large engine bay capable of holding a very big V8 and of course the pickup bed. The 1961 Chrysler New Yorker was the favorite car of NASCAR famed Junior Johnson. He thought it was the kind of car that a doctor or lawyer would drive, and for him it was the best driving moonshine car. He said it would run about 180 miles an hour, loaded or unloaded, and he probably hauled more liquor in that car than all the other cars he's ever had. Let's start looking at some of the modifications to their cars. Bucket seats were fairly common, and these are just a few examples you might find in some of their cars. All the other seats would most likely be removed or used to hide more alcohol. Several runners would install switches that would disable their brake lights and tail lights, and they could cut off their front headlights, which is fine for them because they knew where they were driving. This is a more current license plate flipper. Apparently bootleggers had these too, but I don't know what their mechanisms were in order to flip their plates. Almost all of these cars looked like standard cars from the outside. Even if they had dual exhaust, they would only show one tailpipe, and Junior Johnson again went so far as making his Ford look just like a police officer's car. Because they drove with so much liquor in their car that would weigh hundreds if not 1,000 more pounds, the standard leaf springs on the suspension of their cars would actually get doubled, like in this example here, or on the back end of this 49 Ford right here, you'll see two sets of leaf springs. There was plenty of room under the hood for improvements as well. The best Moonshiner's engine came with the Ford Flathead V8, which was first introduced in 1933 on the Ford's Model B. With this engine, Moonshiners, or the runners, would add more carburetors while using the Offenhauser intake manifolds, and that would increase the airflow to the engine. And then they would also add the Edelbrock cylinder heads, stronger cranks and pistons and rods, just really hopping up the horsepower to these cars. In some cases, they would take the Series 70 Cadillac ambulance engines, which were 346 cubic inch, 5.7 liter V8s, providing 135 horsepower in 37 and 140 horsepower in 1940, and then do the same sort of engine modifications to give them even more horsepower. Probably the most significant modification to these engines were supercharging them or adding turbos to them, and these cars would be modified to have at least 500 cubic inches and well over probably 500 horsepower easy, especially when they were supercharged or turboed. So while the police might stand a chance catching up with, say, the regular 1940 Ford Coupe without it being modified at all, these modified cars would just outrun them. There was nothing the cops could do about it. Well, until the police began adding radios to their cars. Now, that's when the Smoky came around and moonshining wasn't quite as fun anymore.
Hey, well, thank you so much for watching this video on Moonshiner's cars. Comment below on anything that you know, and subscribe. Thank you so much. Really do appreciate that very much. And y'all have a great day. Relax, take it easy, and watch out for crazy people on the road. Bye.